Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Secrets channel. Tonight we step out into a world that does not care whether you are comfortable, prepared, or even particularly clever. The air is sharp enough to sting your lungs, the ground is locked beneath the ice, and every surface feels like it has been waiting all day to steal your body heat. You pull your arms close instinctively, searching for a jacket that does not exist yet, for a blanket that has not been invented for central heating that is about 25,000 years too early. The wind answers by cutting straight through you. This is not the kind of cold you complain about. This is the kind that quietly ends stories. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, share where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always strangely comforting to imagine this little circle of night owls scattered across the globe. Now dim the lights, and imagine that the modern world has slipped away. No hum of electricity, no insulated walls, no neatly folded throw blanket at the end of the pair. Just wind, just snow, just the steady awareness that your body is losing warmth with every passing second. You stand on a vast plain stretching beneath a pale Ice Age sky. The land is open, treeless in many places, covered in grasses that crunch like brittle glass under your feet. This is the Pleistocene epoch during one of its coldest chapters, when enormous ice sheets cover much of the northern hemisphere. At the height of the last glacial maximum around 20,000 years ago, glaciers extended across what are now Canada, northern Europe and large parts of Asia. Sea levels were far lower and entire landscapes existed where oceans now roll. But the real problem is not geography, it is temperature. You feel it immediately, heat draining from your fingers, your nose prickling, breath turning into a small cloud that vanishes just as quickly. Your body is built for endurance walking, for persistence, hunting, for clever cooperation. It is not built for standing half naked in sub-zero wind. And yet humans are here, somehow improbably, stubbornly here. Not because they are stronger than the cold, but because they learn to borrow solutions from the animals around them. A herd of shaggy mammoths moves slowly in the distance, their long hair swaying like heavy curtains. Woolly rhinoceroses, steppe, bison, reindeer. All of them already dressed for this weather in ways you are not. Their coats are not decoration. They are engineering. Hollow guard hairs trap air. Dense underfur prevents heat loss. Skin and fat create layered insulation that modern outdoor brands would absolutely market with dramatic names. You, however, arrive with none of that. So you improvise. One of the quiet revolutions of human history begins not with metal, not with cities, but with the simple realization that survival can be worn. At some point long before written memory, humans start wrapping themselves in animal hides, not casually draping them, but intentionally shaping them to preserve warmth. This may sound obvious to you, sitting comfortably in your climate-controlled room, but recognizing something is useful is very different from understanding how to make it work day after day, winter after winter, because a fresh hide is not a cozy blanket. It is stiff, heavy, awkward. If left untreated, it rots. If frozen, it becomes like a slab of wood. If wet, it conducts cold straight into the body. Turning skin into something wearable requires patience, experimentation, and probably quite a lot of complaining. There is even a slightly bizarre detail researchers have uncovered from later traditional hide-working cultures. Animal brains were sometimes used in the tanning process, because their natural oils help soften fibres. Yes, you heard that correctly. The phrase "every animal has just enough brains to tan its own hide" appears in ethnographic records. It is strangely practical, a little unsettling, and undeniably memorable. You kneel beside a recently hunted reindeer. Not in violence, but in focus. This animal is now shelter, clothing, thread, and tool material all at once. Nothing can be wasted. The cold insists on efficiency. The wind presses against you, reminding you that this is not optional work. Without protection, frostbite and hypothermia are not dramatic events, they are quiet ones. Fingers numb, movement slow, decision-making fades, the body simply stops trying. Fire helps, of course. You gather close to it at night, grateful for its glow, but fire is anchored to a place. You cannot carry a bonfire across the tundra. Clothing, on the other hand, travels with you. fur becomes portable shelter. This shift from relying solely on external heat to conserving internal heat is one of the great turning points in human adaptation. It allows small bands of people to follow migrating animals to cross windswept plains to sleep in places where earlier hominins might not have lasted a single night. Scholars continue to debate exactly when tailored clothing first appeared. Some argue it emerged over 100,000 years ago, while others suggest more complex fitted garments developed later, perhaps alongside the invention of eyed needles made from bone. The evidence is frustratingly indirect since hides decay and leave little trace, forcing archaeologists to reconstruct wardrobes from tools where patterns and microscopic residues. So much of this story is invisible. You are piecing together a technology made of perishable things, skin, sinew, fur, and human ingenuity. You lift the hide, feeling its weight. Already you can sense the difference between standing exposed and wrapping it around your shoulders. The fur traps a layer of air warmed by your own body. That thin cushion, barely noticeable, is the boundary between survival and danger. You begin to understand something profound. Warmth is not about thickness alone, it is about managing space, tiny pockets of air, layers, barriers against wind, principles that modern winter jackets still rely on, though now hidden behind zippers and synthetic fibres. But here there is no factory, no manual, just observation and repetition. The people around you, your small band, maybe 20 or 30 individuals, work together in practiced rhythm. One scrapes fat from the hide using a flake stone tool, another stretches it. Someone else tends the fire, not for warmth this time, but to gently smoke the skin, helping preserve it. You notice how social this process is. Survival is not an individual skill. It is shared knowledge, passed hands to hands, watched, copied, refined. A child sits nearby, watching carefully, learning without being formally taught that staying alive in this world means understanding materials, seasons, and animals in ways modern life rarely demands. The cold continues steady and indifferent, but now wrapped in fur, you are no longer entirely at its mercy. This is the beginning of a long partnership between humans and the creatures they hunt, not just predator and prey, but something closer to reluctant collaborators in the project of endurance. And as the wind slides over the plains and the stars sharpen in the frozen sky, you realize that what you are holding is more than a hide, is the first version of being warm on purpose. The hide around your shoulders is heavy, but the difference it makes is immediate. The wind still blows, the cold still exists, yet now it meets resistance. Instead of slicing straight to your skin, it gets tangled in the dense forest of fur. You feel, perhaps for the first time since stepping into this Ice Age landscape, that survival might actually be negotiable. Early humans quickly learned that fire alone could not solve their problem. A campfire warms only the side facing it, leaving your back exposed to freezing air. Step away from the flames and the heat vanishes within moments. Archaeological evidence shows that controlled use of fire dates back at least 400,000 years long before the coldest phases of the Ice Age, but these later glacial environments demanded something more reliable than a stationary heat source. You shift the hide, pulling it tighter. It smells faintly of smoke and animal fat, not exactly pleasant, but deeply reassuring. That smell means the material has been worked, softened, protected from decay. It means time and effort have been invested in turning something raw into something functional. This is where necessity becomes invention. At first, hides may have been draped loosely over shoulders like capes. Simple, quick, better than nothing. But loose skins slip. They open to the wind. They make it difficult to move, to carry tools, to chase prey across uneven ground. Over generations, people begin modifying them. Small cuts create openings for arms, strips of sinew tie edges together. Gradually, shapeless coverings become fitted garments. You watch someone using a sharpened stone flake to pierce a row of tiny holes along the edge of a hide. A cord made from twisted animal tendon is threaded through, pulling two pieces together. It is slow work. Each puncture must be deliberate. There is no such thing as rushing, because a tear in the wrong place could ruin the entire piece. Bone needles found at sites in Siberia and northern China, some dating back roughly 40,000 years, show clear signs of having been used to stitch clothing. These needles even had carefully carved eyes, just like modern ones, allowing sinew thread to pass through. This suggests tailored garments were already highly developed by the time humans spread into the coldest parts of Eurasia. It's strange to think that what you are witnessing is essentially prehistoric sewing. There is also an unexpectedly practical detail. Fur works best when it faces inward against the body, while the tougher, leather side faces outwards to block wind and moisture. Many traditional Arctic cultures used this exact arrangement thousands of years later. The principle seems to have been discovered very early through trial and error. Wear it the wrong way, once feel miserable, then never make that mistake again. You run your hand along the inner surface. The softness traps warmth in a way woven fabric never quite replicates. Each hair creates a tiny barrier, slowing the escape of heat your body constantly produces. Some researchers suggest that the development of clothing was as important to human expansion as toolmaking or language. Without it, migrations into northern latitudes would have stalled. Others propose that shelters alone might have sufficed in certain regions, sparking an ongoing academic discussion about how rapidly clothing technology advanced. Historians still argue whether tailored garments emerged suddenly as a breakthrough or gradually evolved over tens of thousands of years. Around you, the group continues working in quiet coordination. One person chews a strip of hide to soften it, an action that looks odd but is remarkably effective. The moisture and motion help break down stiff fibres. Ethnographic studies from much later periods record similar techniques, confirming that sometimes the most sophisticated tool available is simply your own jaw. Yes, part of Ice Age fashion involves chewing your coat. The process is not glamorous, but it is deeply skilled. Scraping tools remove fat and tissue. Stretching frames keep skins from shrinking. Smoke from low fires introduces chemicals that discourage bacteria. Every stage determines whether the final garment will last weeks or years. You notice how much patience this requires. There are no shortcuts. Each hide represents hours of labour layered onto the risks already taken during the hunt. Clothing is not disposable. It is an investment of energy, knowledge, and cooperation. When night falls, you sit among the group wrapped in layers that still feel unfamiliar but undeniably effective. The temperature drops sharply after sunset. Ice crystals form along the edges of your covering, yet inside your own heat remains close held like water in a vessel. This changes how you experience darkness itself. Without protection, night would drive you toward the fire in desperation. Now you can move, you can gather tools, check snares, even walk a short distance away without panic. Mobility in cold environments is power. It means you're no longer tied to a single glowing spot on the landscape. The animals nearby demonstrate the same principle. Reindeer lie down in the snow, confident in insulation that you are only beginning to imitate. Wolves trot across frozen ground without hesitation. Survival here has always belonged to those who carry their shelter with them, and now slowly you are learning that trick. The stars above seem unusually sharp in the Ice Age sky, unobscured by the modern haze. You pull the hide closer, feeling its reassuring weight. It is not just clothing. It is technology in its earliest, most intimate form. A tool you wear, a solution that moves as you move. Somewhere in the distance, a mammoth rumbles a low sound carried across the frozen plain. You realize that the same world that threatens you has also provided the materials to endure it. All you had to do was learn how to use them. Morning comes slowly, not with warmth, but with a dim grey light spreading across the frozen land. You wake already aware of the cold, because here the cold never truly leaves. It lingers like a quiet companion pressing against the edges of every moment. Yet inside your layers of fur there is a small pocket of comfort. Not luxury, not even what you would call cozy, but survivable. You stand and look out across the Ice Age landscape and it feels impossibly vast. This is not a world of dense forests or bustling ecosystems. Much of it is what scientists call steppe tundra, a wide, dry grassland that stretches across continents. During the last Ice Age, this environment covered enormous areas from Western Europe all the way to Siberia and into North America. It supported herds of grazing animals that modern climates could never sustain in such numbers. The air is dry, surprisingly so. Many people imagine the Ice Age as endlessly snowy, but large parts of this region receive little precipitation. Instead of deeps, no, you see windswept plains, frozen soil, and low vegetation clinging stubbornly to life. The dryness actually makes the cold more dangerous because there is little natural insulation from storms sweeping unhindered across open ground. You begin to understand that surviving here is not just about warmth, it's about reading the land. The group moves deliberately, scanning the horizon, watching animal paths etched into frost-hardened earth. Mobility is everything. These people follow food, water, and seasonal changes in ways that feel almost like choreography. And your fur clothing allows you to move with them instead of hiding from the environment. Without these hides, long-distance travel would be impossible. Frostbite could set in within minutes during strong winds. Modern experiments have shown that exposed skin in sub-zero conditions can freeze in less than half an hour. Ice Age humans learned this not through laboratory measurements, but through direct and unforgiving experience. You pull your covering tighter as a gust sweeps across the plain. The outer leather stiffens slightly with frost acting as a shield. Inside, the fur continues to trap heat. It's a simple system, yet remarkably effective. Nearby, someone adjusts a bundle of additional skins carried across their back. These are not just spare garments, they are tools for adaptation. Weather shifts quickly here. A calm morning can become a biting afternoon. Having extra layers can mean the difference between continuing a journey and turning back. There is also an unexpected advantage to these materials. Fur does not just insulate, it manages moisture. Snow that lands on the outer surface can be brushed away before it melts. This prevents water from soaking inward and stealing warmth. Modern winter gear mimics this principle using synthetic fibres, but here the solution walks on 4 legs before becoming clothing. Some archaeologists believe that access to large Ice Age animals like reindeer and mammoth played a crucial role in human expansion because they provided not only meat but vast quantities of usable hide. A single mammoth could yield enough material for shelters, clothing and tools for an entire group. This made certain hunting successes transformative events shaping survival for months. You notice how carefully every scrap is handled. Nothing is discarded casually. Even narrow strips are saved later, twisted into cords or bindings. Resourcefulness is not a virtue here, it is a requirement. A slightly curious observation emerges as you watch the group travel. The fur garments are not identical. Some are thick and shaggy, others shorter and denser. Different animals produce different qualities of insulation. Reindeer hide, for example, contains hollow hairs that provide exceptional warmth while remaining relatively lightweight. Later scientific studies confirm that reindeer fur is one of the best natural insulators known, outperforming many modern materials in cold, dry conditions. You shift your own covering, noticing its weight compared to another person's lighter wrap. Choices are being made constantly. What to wear for movement, what to save for rest, what to repair now rather than later. Researchers still debate how specialized these clothing systems became. Some argue Ice Age humans had seasonal outfits tailored to different temperatures, while others suggest flexibility mattered more than strict design. The truth likely lies somewhere between improvisation and tradition. The land itself offers clues. You see tracks frozen into mud that thawed briefly weeks ago. You pass a sheltered dip in the terrain where the wind softens. Campsites are chosen with astonishing care, always balancing access to resources with protection from exposure. Clothing works together with geography. At midday, the group pauses, not because they're tired, but because maintenance never stops. One person uses a stone scraper to remove ice that has formed along a seam. Another checks stitching made of sinew, ensuring it has not stiffened or snapped. Garments here are living objects constantly adjusted to remain functional. You realise how different this is from modern clothing, which you likely wear without thinking. Here what you wear demands attention. It must be dried, cleaned, repaired and protected. Neglect it and the environment wastes no time reminding you. A child laughs as they tumble briefly into powdery snow, then quickly stand and brush themselves off under the watchful eye of an elder. Even play is monitored. Staying dry is a rule learned early. In the distance, herds continue their slow migrations, dark shapes against pale ground. The humans follow wrapped in borrowed fur, moving through a landscape that would otherwise reject them entirely. Step by step, you cross terrain that once seemed uninhabitable, and with each step, the partnership between human ingenuity and animal adaptation becomes clearer. This is not simply a story of endurance, it is a story of learning to belong in a place that never intended to welcome you. As you continue across the pale grasslands, you begin to notice something subtle but extraordinary. The warmth you feel is not coming from the fur itself, it is coming from you. The hide is simply holding that warmth in place, guarding it like a careful gatekeeper. This is the quiet science behind survival in the Ice Age. Your body is always producing heat. Even now, walking slowly, your muscles generate energy that radiates outward. Without protection, that heat disappears almost instantly into the surrounding air. But when you wear fur, thousands of tiny hairs create pockets that trap air close to your skin. Air, when it cannot move freely, becomes an excellent insulator. This principle is so effective that modern winter clothing still relies on it. Down jackets, fleece and insulated gear all work by capturing still air. Ice Age humans did not write equations about thermal conductivity yet through observation and persistence. They mastered the concept long before science explained it. You crouch and examine the hide more closely. The outer layer is tougher, slightly glossy with preserved oils. Beneath it, the fur forms a dense underlayer. Many cold-adapted animals grow two types of hair. Guard hairs repel wind and moisture while the underfur traps heat. By wearing the entire skin, humans inherit both systems at once. It's less like making clothing and more like borrowing an animal's climate control. Experimental archaeologists in recent decades have recreated Ice Age-style garments using traditional methods. Many were surprised to find that properly prepared reindeer skin clothing can keep a person warm at temperatures far below freezing without modern insulation. These experiments provide rare physical confirmation of what ancient ingenuity achieved. You shift your shoulders, feeling how the garment holds warmth without needing to be overly tight. That looseness matters. If clothing compresses the fur too much, the insulating air disappears, so the cut must balance shape and space, a detail discovered only through repeated experience. Nearby, someone shakes out a skin that had been resting on the ground. Frost crystals scatter into the air like glittering dust. The hide remains flexible, which means it was prepared correctly. A poorly treated skin would have frozen stiff overnight. There is also a curious sound when people move, a soft rustling almost like dry grass brushing together. Entire conversations happen, accompanied by the whisper of fur against fur. It is a soundscape of survival, subtle but constant. One unexpected advantage of these garments is their adaptability. If you grow too warm while walking, you can loosen them to allow airflow. If wind rises, you close them tightly. Clothing becomes adjustable shelter, something like carrying a small house that opens and closes as needed. Some researchers have even suggested that the mastery of clothing may have influenced human physiology over time. As cultural solutions improved, biological pressures to evolve thicker body hair lessened. Culture in a sense replaced anatomy. Not everyone agrees with that interpretation. Anthropologists continue to explore how much clothing altered human evolutionary pathways, and the question remains open. Still, the idea that technology can shape biology is a fascinating one to consider as you pull your borrowed warmth closer. A slightly amusing detail comes to mind as you watch someone carefully fluff the inner fur of their garment. Fluffing restores trapped air, much like shaking out a modern comforter. Yes, Ice Age people may have been performing the prehistoric version of plumping a blanket. You notice also that different tasks require slight adjustments. Hunters preparing to move quickly wear lighter skins to avoid overheating. Those staying in camp wrap themselves in thicker layers. Flexibility is key. Overheating can be just as dangerous as freezing because sweat trapped in clothing can later chill the body rapidly. Managing heat becomes an active skill, not a passive condition. The landscape continues to test these strategies. A cloud passes overhead and the temperature seems to drop instantly. You feel the shift, yet the insulation holds. Your own warmth stays with you, recycled again and again within the soft architecture of fur. It's remarkable to realize that this knowledge came without laboratories, without textbooks, without even written language. Just observation, failure, success, and memory passed through generations. A young member of the group watches an elder adjust a seam, learning not through explanation, but through repetition. Knowledge here is physical, it lives in hands, not words. In this frozen world, understanding warmth is not theoretical, it is life itself. And as the wind sweeps once more across the tundra, you walk forward carrying a small, carefully protected climate that exists nowhere else but within the layers wrapped around you. By now you no longer see the hunt as something separate from clothing. Food and warmth are bound together in ways that feel impossible to untangle. When the group tracks animals across the steppe, they are not just searching for meat. They are searching for future shelter, future thread, future protection against winters not yet arrived. You follow behind experienced hunters, your feet finding their rhythm in the frozen ground. Every movement is measured. The cold rewards efficiency and punishes waste. Even the energy spent walking must be justified by what the hunt provides. The animals you pursue are perfectly adapted to this climate. Reindeer migrate in enormous herds, their bodies insulated by thick coats that change with the seasons. These migrations formed predictable patterns during the Ice Age, and archaeological sites across Europe show repeated human occupation along these routes. This suggests that early communities planned their movements around animal behaviour with remarkable precision. You begin to see the hunt as part of a larger cycle. Animals survive the cold through their fur. Humans survive by carefully transferring that advantage. When a reindeer is finally brought down, the moment is treated with focus rather than celebration. There is relief, certainly, but also urgency. Processing must begin quickly before the hide stiffens in the freezing air. You watch as skilled hands separate skin from muscle using flint blades sharper than many modern knives. These stone tools, though simple in appearance, are engineered through careful flaking to create edges only a few molecules thick. Archaeologists studying microscopic wear patterns have found that many such tools were specifically used for hide working rather than butchering alone. Each cut follows an invisible map learned through practice. Damage the hide and you lose valuable surface area. Leave too much tissue attached and the skin becomes harder to treat. Precision matters. There is also an interesting cultural detail observed in some later hunter-gatherer societies that researchers think may echo Ice Age traditions. Certain individuals specialised in hide preparation becoming highly respected for their skill. Good clothing makers were as essential as good hunters. Warmth, after all, determined whether the hunt could happen at all. You help carry the heavy skin back toward camp, surprised at its weight. Wet hide is dense, almost stubborn. It resists folding, resists shaping. At this stage, it is still far from becoming wearable. Transformation requires time. The camp soon fills with activity. Scraping begins almost immediately. Stone tools remove fat and connective tissue in long, rhythmic strokes. The sound is steady and almost meditative. Scrape, turn, scrape again. There is no wasted motion. People talk quietly, sometimes laugh, sometimes work in silence. This is familiar labour repeated across generations. A curious observation arises as you sit nearby. Even though the work is physically demanding, it is often done in groups. Cooperation speeds the process and prevents the hide from freezing before it can be treated. Survival encourages social closeness. Historians still argue whether this kind of collaborative production helped strengthen early human language and communication skills. Did complex tasks like clothing manufacture push people to develop clearer ways of sharing instructions? Or did language already exist and simply find new uses here? The evidence remains open to interpretation. You notice an elder carefully examining the direction of the fur before continuing. Orientation matters. If pieces are later joined incorrectly, the garment will not shed wind properly. Such attention to detail reveals how much knowledge is embedded in what might seem like a simple object. There is also an unexpectedly practical discovery you witness firsthand. Warm hides are easier to work than frozen ones, so some are briefly warmed near the fire, not cooked, just softened enough to remain flexible. It is a delicate balance. Too much heat damages the fibres. Too little leaves them rigid. The smell of the camp grows stronger as the day progresses. Animal fat, smoke, damp leather and cold air blend into a scent that would probably seem overwhelming to modern noses. Yet here it signals productivity. It smells like preparation. It smells like security against the next storm. As evening approaches, the hide has already begun its transformation. It is cleaner stretched and beginning to dry under careful supervision. This single animal will become multiple garments, repairs for older ones' bindings, and possibly coverings for shelter walls. Nothing about the hunt was temporary. Every success echoes forward into the future. You sit back, wrapped in earlier work from earlier hunts, watching new materials slowly join the cycle. This is continuity made visible. Each layer you wear today is the result of decisions made days, weeks, even seasons ago. And tomorrow the process will begin again. Because in this world, survival is not a single achievement. It is something you must keep making one hide at a time. The hide you watched being cleaned yesterday now stretches across a simple wooden frame pulled tight with cords of sinew. It looks less like clothing and more like a pale sheet of raw material caught somewhere between animal and tool. This is the slow middle stage, the part that demands patience rather than strength. You run your fingers across its surface. It is cool, slightly damp and surprisingly smooth in places where scraping has already done its work. Turning skin into something wearable is not a single action, but a sequence of careful transformations. Each must happen in the right order. First comes the removal of every trace of flesh and fat. Even tiny remnants can cause decay later. Stone scrapers shaped to fit comfortably in the hand move again and again across the surface. Archaeologists have identified specialized scraper tools at many Ice Age sites, often worn down from repeated hide processing. Their edges carry microscopic polish created by contact with collagen fibers, silent evidence of countless hours of labor. The rhythm of scraping fills the air. It is not unpleasant. In fact, it becomes almost soothing, like the steady ticking of a clock you did not realize was there. Once cleaned, the hide must be stretched so it does not shrink as it dries. Without stretching, it would harden into something closer to wood than fabric. The frame holds it under tension, while workers adjust cords to keep the surface even. You notice how often people check this tension, tightening one, say loosening another. It is constant attention. There is also a step that feels surprisingly intimate. Softening the fibers requires working them physically. The hide is bent, pulled, and rubbed to break down stiffness. Sometimes it is twisted back and forth, sometimes it is pressed underfoot. The goal is flexibility because warmth depends on how well the material can move with the body. A fascinating detail recorded among later traditional tanning cultures involves using emulsified animal brains mixed with water and worked into the skin. The oils help separate fibers, making the hide supple. While direct Ice Age evidence is difficult to preserve, many researchers believe similar organic treatments were likely used because the chemistry is so effective and requires no specialized ingredients. It is a strange thought. The animal continues to protect you even through its own biology. The smell deepens during the sticky. Not foul exactly, but rich and earthy. Smoke drifts from a low fire nearby where some hides are gently exposed to cool smoke. This is not about cooking. It is preservation. Compounds in the smoke help prevent bacterial growth and add water resistance. You sit close enough to feel faint warmth from the embers while watching thin threads of smoke curl around the stretched skin. The process is quiet and deliberate. Too much heat would ruin everything. Too little smoke would leave the hide vulnerable. Scholars still debate how standardized these methods were across different Ice Age cultures. Some propose that each region developed its own traditions depending on available animals and climate conditions. Others believe knowledge spread widely as groups interacted and shared techniques. With so little organic material surviving, the discussion continues without a final answer. As the day progresses, you see the surface begin to change. It becomes lighter in color, more uniform, almost velvety. When touched, it no longer feels like raw skin, but something closer to thick cloth. This is the moment transformation becomes visible. A young apprentice tries working a smaller piece imitating the movements of an elder. The motions are awkward at first, the hide resists, but guidance comes through demonstration rather than instruction. Hands correct hands. Experience passes quietly from one generation to the next. You realize that this knowledge cannot easily be written down even if writing existed. It lives in movement, pressure, timing. It must be seen and felt to be understood. Another interesting observation appears when the hide is finally removed from the frame. It does not hang limp. It holds a soft structure ready to be cut and shaped. The difference between untreated and treated skin is astonishing. One would crack if folded. The other bends easily, ready to become part of daily life. You lift a finished section and drape it over your arm. It is lighter than before, warmer, and carries the faint scent of smoke that will likely remain for years. This smell, once sharp, now feels reassuring. It means the material will last. The camp begins preparing for the next stage, cutting and assembling pieces into garments. Yet already you can see how much effort lies behind even the simplest covering. Warmth here is never accidental. It is made through hours of quiet work, steady hands and shared memory. And as evening approaches once more, you understand that survival in the Ice Age depends not only on bold hunts or roaring fires, but on these weekend moments of scraping, stretching and transforming nature into protection. Now that the hide has been softened and cured, attention shifts to shaping it into something you can actually wear. A flat skin, no matter how well prepared, is only potential. Turning it into clothing requires cutting, piercing and joining, all done with tools that look modest but perform with remarkable precision. You sit beside a small collection of implements laid out on the ground. There are sharp stone flakes, narrow bone awls and slender needles carved from animal bone. At first glance they seem simple, yet each has been shaped carefully for a specific purpose. This is not a random assortment. It is a prehistoric sewing kit. Bone needles discovered at sites such as Kostenki in Russia and other Upper Paleolithic locations show clear signs of polish around the eye where thread repeatedly passed through. Some date back more than 35,000 years, providing strong evidence that tailored garments were already in use during this period. The existence of these needles suggests clothing was fitted to the body rather than merely draped. You pick one up. It is smooth, surprisingly light, and still sharp at the tip. Someone spent hours grinding and shaping this small object with stone abrasives. It is easy to forget how much effort goes into making a single tool when there is no metal, no machines, no shortcuts. Nearby sinew from a recent hunt is being prepared as thread. Tendons are separated into long fibres, then twisted gently together. When dried, sinew shrinks, slightly tightening seams in a way that acts almost like natural elastic. This makes it ideal for stitching hides that must endure movement and strain. A slightly unexpected fact is that sinew thread becomes stronger when damp, and then contracts as it dries, and sealing tiny gaps against wind. Nature once again provides both material and engineering. You begin to understand why stitching is done with such care. Each hole punched into the hide is permanent. Too many holes weaken the material. Too few make seams unreliable. The spacing must be just right. An elder demonstrates by pressing an awl through the leather side, creating a clean opening without tearing fibres. The needle follows, drawing sinew through in a looping pattern that distributes tension evenly. It is slow, repetitive work, yet deeply satisfying to watch. Every stitch adds structure. Every join shapes the garment closer to the human form. Historians continue to examine how advanced these sewing techniques were. Some scholars believe Ice Age clothing may have included shaped sleeves, fitted leggings, and layered constructions similar to those used by much later Arctic peoples. Others caution that evidence is incomplete, urging restraint in reconstructing too detailed a wardrobe. The debate remains active, fueled by new discoveries and experimental reconstructions. As you assist holding your pieces steady while another person stitches you, notice how garments are designed with movement in mind. Extra space at the shoulders, reinforced seams along areas of stress. Even without formal measurements, the makers clearly understand anatomy through experience. There is also creativity involved. Pieces of different hides are combined to balance durability and warmth. Thick fur might cover the torso, while lighter skins allow flexibility in the arms. Function guides design, but adaptation allows variation. A child nearby practices threading a needle with exaggerated concentration tongue pressed against their lip. Learning begins early because the skill cannot be improvised in adulthood. Clothing here is too important to leave to chance. The soundscape of the camp changes again. Instead of scraping, you hear soft punctures, gentle pulls of thread, and the occasional murmur of approval when a seam lies flat. These are the quiet sounds of technology being assembled by hand. An interesting cultural detail noted by anthropologists studying later hide working societies is that tools like needles were often treasured possessions, repaired repeatedly and sometimes buried with their owners. This suggests they held significance beyond mere utility. It is possible Ice Age people felt something similar about the objects that allowed them to survive hostile climates. You test a newly joined seam with your hands. It holds firmly, flexing without splitting. The garment is beginning to take recognizable shape. Not decorative, not elaborate, but purposeful. You slip an arm through an opening and feel how the stitched hide settles into place. For the first time, it feels less like wearing an animal and more like wearing clothing. This transformation marks an important shift. Protection is no longer improvised each day. It is constructed, maintained, and improved over time. And as twilight gathers once more over the frozen plains, you sit among others, doing the same careful work, each stitch a small act of defiance against the cold that surrounds you. By the time several garments are underway, the camp carries a scent that is impossible to ignore. It drifts through everything. Smoke from low fires, warmed leather, damp earth, animal fat. It is strong, persistent, and to you at first a little overwhelming. But no one here reacts to it at all. This smell is the smell of survival. Hide preparation does not end once stitching begins. Even finished pieces require continued treatment to remain flexible and resistant to the elements. Without maintenance, they would stiffen, crack, or absorb moisture that could later freeze. So the work continues in cycles. Rub, warm, smoke, dry, repeat. You sit near one of the small mouldering fires used specifically for curing. These fires are carefully controlled to produce more smoke than flame. The hides are suspended above them, never close enough to scorch. The goal is to let the smoke seep into the fibres, adding preservative qualities that help the material last through wet and cold conditions. Modern analysis of traditionally smoked hides shows that compounds from wood smoke act as natural antimicrobial agents. Though Ice Age people did not describe chemistry, they clearly recognised the effect. Smoked garments resisted rot and performed better in harsh weather. You watch as someone checks the colour of a skin, turning it slowly. A faint golden tint spreads across its surface. That's enough. Too much smoke would make it brittle. Experience guides the decision more than any visible measurement. The smell clings to your own clothing now. It settles into your hair, your hands, even your sense of taste. Oddly, after a while it becomes comforting. It signals readiness like the familiar scent of a well-used workshop. There is also an unexpected practical benefit. The smoky odour may help deter insects during warmer months. While deep winter keeps pests away, seasonal thaws can bring swarms that threaten stored materials. Smoke-treated hides appear less appealing to them, a small but useful advantage. As people work, conversation flows quietly. Stories, observations, shared memories. Labour and social life blend seamlessly. Clothing production is not isolated from daily existence, it is woven into it. Some researchers believe these communal work periods strengthen social bonds essential for survival. Making garments together ensured knowledge was shared widely rather than held by a few individuals. Others suggest specialisation still occurred, with certain members recognised for exceptional skill. The balance between shared and specialised knowledge remains an open question among scholars. You notice how frequently garments are inspected even after completion. A seam is tested, a damp patch is dried, a surface is re-rubbed with fat to maintain flexibility. Nothing is left unattended for long. This constant care might seem exhausting, yet it prevents far greater hardship later. A well-maintained hide can last for years. Neglect it for even a short time and it may fail when needed most. An amusing moment breaks the seriousness when someone shakes out a newly smoked garment and accidentally sends a puff of soot into the air, prompting laughter and exaggerated complaints from others. Even here humour finds space. Life is not only endurance, it is also adaptation with a human touch. You try on one of the finished pieces. It feels softer now than earlier versions, more responsive to movement. The smoke treatment has added both resilience and a faint crackling sound when flexed, almost like dry leaves brushing together. The camp itself reflects this ongoing relationship with hides. Pieces hang from frames, others are folded carefully. Tools remain close at hand for the next repair. Clothing is never truly finished. It exists in a state of continual renewal. Historians sometimes refer to technologies like this as maintenance cultures, where the key skill lies not in creating new objects but in sustaining existing ones. Ice Age communities may have relied heavily on this philosophy, investing time to ensure every resource lasted as long as possible. You sit back and breathe in the smoky air, no longer sharp to your senses. Instead, it feels warm, familiar, almost reassuring. The scent means that when the next storm rolls across the plains, when temperatures plunge and winds rise again, the materials prepared here will hold. And in a world defined by cold, that quiet confidence is everything. As days pass, you begin to notice that humans are not the only ones teaching lessons about surviving the cold. The animals themselves offer constant instruction if you're willing to pay attention. You watch a herd of reindeer moving steadily across the plain. They do not rush. They do not appear to struggle. Their bodies are built for this environment, and every part of them demonstrates strategies that humans have begun to imitate. Their thick coats are layered. Their legs minimize heat loss. Even their noses warm incoming air before it reaches their lungs. Ice Age people likely observed these traits closely. Survival depended not only on hunting animals, but on studying them. Many archaeologists suggest that clothing design was inspired directly by how animal pelts functioned in nature. The idea of wearing fur inward, for instance, mirrors how insulation lies closest to an animal's skin. You kneel and examine a shed tuft of hair caught on frozen brush. Each strand is hollow, trapping air. Modern microscopy confirms that reindeer hair has this structure, making it exceptionally efficient at retaining warmth. It is like thousands of tiny insulating tubes bundled together. It becomes clear that early humans were not inventing solutions from nothing. They were adapting existing ones, translating biology into culture. Nearby, a wolf trots past at a distance, its winter coat thick and pale. Predators too embody lessons, their fur changes with the seasons, growing denser as temperatures fall. This natural cycle may have influenced how humans timed their own hunting, selecting animals when their coats were at peak condition. There is evidence that Ice Age hunters targeted prey specifically during colder months when fur quality was highest. Such timing suggests careful ecological awareness rather than random pursuit. You adjust your own garment, suddenly aware that you are wrapped in knowledge gathered through countless acts of observation. A slightly unusual detail comes to mind as you watch animals rest directly on the snow without discomfort. Many species use their fur not only as insulation, but as a barrier that prevents snow from melting against their bodies. Humans learn to do the same by choosing the right hides for bedding and outerwear. You test this by sitting on a folded skin. The snow beneath compresses but does not melt quickly. Your body heat remains contained. It is a small but meaningful discovery. Scholars still discuss how consciously early humans analyzed these animal traits. Some propose deliberate imitation, almost like early scientific study. Others believe knowledge accumulated gradually through experience without formal reasoning. The truth may lie somewhere between instinct and insight. As the group moves again, you notice how clothing styles reflect different animal sources. A heavier bison hide offers durability against wind. A lighter deer skin allows flexibility for walking long distances. Choices resemble an unspoken catalogue of materials, each with its own advantage. Even footwear reflects this learning. Wrapping feet in fur-lined coverings mimics the insulating structure of animal hooves and pads. Without such protection, frostbite would quickly make travel impossible. You glance down at your own steps, grateful for the barrier between skin and frozen ground. Every stride is made possible by layers borrowed from another creature's design. An elder gestures toward distant grazing animals, explaining through demonstration which ones provide the warmest hides and which are better for tools. Knowledge here is ecological literacy. To survive, you must know not only how to hunt, but why certain animals matter more than others. The connection between people and prey begins to feel less like domination and more like exchange. Animals offer materials. Humans carry their adaptations forward in new forms. Some anthropologists suggest this deep reliance fostered early spiritual respect for animal, seeing them as partners in survival rather than mere resources. While direct Ice Age beliefs are difficult to reconstruct later, indigenous traditions often reflect similar attitudes, hinting at ancient roots. You walk on wrapped in fur that echoes the landscape around you. The boundary between human and environment feels thinner here. Clothing is not separate from nature, it is nature reshaped. And as cold wind moves across the tundra once more, you realize that every lesson needed to endure this world has been present all along, written quietly in the bodies of the animals beside you. With more experience, you begin to understand that a single hide is rarely enough. Surviving this climate depends on layering a concept so familiar to you in the modern world that it feels almost instinctive. Yet here it must be discovered through repetition and necessity. One morning, as temperatures plunge lower than usual, you notice members of the group adding extra skins over what they already wear. These are not random additions. Each layer serves a purpose. The inner layer traps warmth close to the body. The outer layer blocks wind and protects against abrasion from ice tools or rough ground. This approach mirrors the natural structure of many Ice Age animals. Mammoths, for example, possessed both a dense underwool and long outer hairs that shielded them from snow and freezing gusts. Fossilized remains and preserved carcasses found in Siberian permafrost reveal just how elaborate these coats were. Some hairs measured over 1 meter in length, forming a moving barrier against elements. You try adding an extra wrap yourself. At first it feels bulky, almost restrictive, but after walking for a short time you notice the difference. Heat builds steadily inside the layers held in place even when wind cuts across open ground. Layering allows flexibility. If you become too warm while travelling, one covering can be loosened or removed without exposing yourself entirely. If weather worsens, it can be tightened again. Clothing becomes adjustable architecture, a portable shelter responding to changing conditions. Archaeological interpretations suggest that Ice Age garments were likely worn in combinations rather than as single pieces. Some sites have yielded tools specialised for cutting narrow strips, possibly used to fasten multiple layers together, or create belts that held garments in place. A small but telling detail appears when you watch someone shake snow from their outer covering before entering camp. Keeping outer layers dry preserves the insulating quality of the inner ones. It is a simple habit, yet critical. You begin to notice how garments are organised almost like systems. There are pieces meant for movement, others reserved for rest. Thick robes or cloaks are used during sleep, while lighter fitted items are worn when walking long distances. Researchers conducting cold environment simulations have found that layered natural skins can rival modern winter clothing when arranged properly. The trapped air between layers creates additional insulation, much like double-walled construction in buildings. There is also room for improvisation. A sudden storm might require wrapping spare hides around shoulders or legs, creating temporary reinforcement. The clothing system is not rigid, it adapts constantly. Some scholars have proposed that this ability to layer effectively allowed humans to expand into regions previously dominated only by highly specialised animals. Others caution that migration depended on many factors, including social cooperation and knowledge of seasonal shelters. The role of clothing remains central, but discussions continue about how decisive it truly was. You sit with others, adjusting straps and ties made from sinew, securing layers so they do not shift during travel. These fastenings are simple but clever, allowing garments to stay snug without restricting circulation. An amusing moment arises when someone bundles themselves so thoroughly that movement becomes awkward, prompting laughter from the rest of the group. Too many layers can hinder as much as too few. Balance is everything. Through trial and error, you begin to sense the right combination for different situations. Walking across open tundra demands breathability to prevent sweating. Standing still while watching for animals requires heavier insulation. The knowledge is not written anywhere. It is learned in muscles and memory. As evening settles, you wrap yourself in multiple hides and feel the accumulated warmth hold steady against the growing cold. Each layer contributes, quietly building a barrier between you and the frozen world outside. In this way, layering becomes more than a technique. It becomes a strategy that allows you to live, travel and rest in conditions that would otherwise be impossible. And beneath the vast Ice Age sky wrapped in borrowed fur arranged with growing skill, you carry your shelter not as a single garment, but as a carefully assembled system of survival. With layered clothing, now part of daily life, movement across the landscape changes in a profound way. You're no longer confined to small safe zones near shelter or fire. The group begins travelling farther, following herds across valleys and over ridges that once might have been too dangerous to cross. Fur technology, if you can call it that, has unlocked geography. You set out at dawn, bundled carefully, each person checking ties and seams before leaving camp. The journey ahead is long, but no one hesitates. These migrations are essential. Animals move with the seasons, and to survive, humans must move with them. Archaeological evidence shows that during the Ice Age, Homo sapiens expanded into regions such as northern Siberia and eventually across the land bridge known as Beringia into the Americas. This expansion would have required reliable protection against extreme cold, especially during long stretches of travel with limited natural shelter. You walk steadily, noticing how clothing allows a rhythm to develop. Without proper insulation, every gust of wind would force you to stop to huddle to recover. Now you maintain momentum. Travel becomes sustainable. The land itself feels immense. Frozen rivers stretch like pale roads. Low hills rise in the distance, shaped by wind and ancient glaciers. The sky seems larger here, unobstructed by trees, giving a sense that you are walking through an open, silent world. At midday, the group pauses briefly, not because of exhaustion, but to check garments. A loose seam is tightened. A damp patch is dried before it can chill the wearer. Maintenance happens constantly, even during travel. You realise that migration is not just about direction, it is about preparation. Some researchers suggest that innovations in clothing may have reduced the need for large permanent shelters, allowing Ice Age groups to remain mobile. Others argue that both strategies work together, with portable clothing complementing temporary structures made of bonewood and hides. The discussion continues, shaped by new discoveries at excavation sites. As you continue walking, you pass through a corridor of land partially shielded from wind. The difference is noticeable. Clothing works best when combined with smart route choices. Knowledge of terrain is just as important as what you wear. A curious observation comes when you see how people adjust their layers during the journey. No one waits to become uncomfortable. Small changes happen constantly. A wrap loosened here, a hood tightened there. It is a living system of temperature control. This attentiveness prevents sweating, which could later freeze and create dangerous chills. Managing moisture is as vital as blocking cold itself. You recall how animals also migrate with remarkable precision, timing their movements to match seasonal resources. Humans are now doing something big, using clothing to extend their reach into territories once accessible only to fur-covered species. There is also an emotional aspect to this mobility. Travel builds confidence. Instead of fearing the environment, the group navigates it with growing familiarity. Landscapes that once seemed hostile begin to feel like known pathways. Anthropologists have long debated whether technological adaptation or cognitive flexibility played the greater role in these expansions. Did better clothing make migration possible, or did human curiosity drive innovation? The two likely fed each other, but the question remains open. You stop briefly at a ridge and look back. The path behind you is already disappearing under drifting snow. Movement's constant here. Staying in one place too long risks exhausting local resources. The hides you wear creak softly as you walk, a reminder of the animals that made this journey possible. Every step forward carries pieces of past hunts, past labour, past learning. As evening approaches, the group selects a new campsite near a shallow rise that offers slight protection from wind. Hides will soon be used again, this time as ground cover and windbreaks. Clothing and shelter blend into one another, serving interchangeable roles. You settle down, still wrapped in layers that made this journey possible. Without them, the distance travelled today would have been unthinkable. In this frozen age, clothing is not just protection, it is permission to explore. And with each migration, humans carry their fragile warmth deeper into the coldest corners of the world. As the group settles into this new camp, your attention shifts to the smallest members among you. Survival here is not only measured by the strength of hunters or the skill of hide workers, but by whether children can endure the cold. If they cannot, the future cannot either. You watch as a child is carefully bundled by an older caregiver. The process is deliberate and gentle. First, a soft inner wrap, likely from a well-worn hide that has already been broken in through years of use. Then an outer layer with thicker fur. The garments are adjusted so no gaps allow wind to reach exposed skin. Children lose heat faster than adults because their bodies are smaller and their surface area relative to mass is greater. While Ice Age people did not express this in scientific terms, they clearly understood the effect through experience. Extra care is always given to the young. Archaeological discoveries support the idea that tailored clothing existed even for children. At some Upper Paleolithic burial sites, such as those found in parts of Russia, tiny beads and ornaments have been uncovered in patterns that suggest they were sewn onto garments sized for young individuals. These traces imply that protective clothing was not improvised, but intentionally made to fit growing bodies. You notice how mobility is balanced with warmth. The child must be able to move to learn to explore safely. Overly rigid wrapping would make that impossible. So the clothing is shaped to allow bending arms, walking legs, and curious hands. There is also a sense of continuity in these garments. Many are likely repurposed from adult clothing that has been resized or repaired. Materials are too valuable to waste, and passing them down carries both practicality and memory. A slightly surprising detail emerges when you see how often children's clothing is checked and adjusted throughout the day. A loose tie is fixed immediately. Dampness is removed before it becomes dangerous. Attention is constant, almost instinctive. Some anthropologists believe that raising children in such demanding climates strengthened cooperative caregiving. Survival depended on more than parents alone. Entire groups shared responsibility, ensuring that knowledge and protection surrounded the youngest members at all times. You sit nearby as a small group works on resizing a hide. Cuts are made carefully to shape a miniature version of adult garments. The same techniques apply. Scraping, softening, stitching. Skill does not change with scale. Historians continue to discuss how childhood itself may have differed in Ice Age societies. Some suggest that practical learning began very early because environmental pressures required competence sooner than in many later cultures. Others caution against assuming childhood was shortened, pointing out that care and teaching likely remained gradual and attentive. The question remains open, shaped by limited but intriguing evidence. You watch a child attempt to mimic the scraping motion with a dull tool guided patiently by an elder. It is less about productivity and more about familiarity. Knowledge grows through imitation long before mastery. The clothing they wear also serves another purpose beyond warmth. It signals belonging. Each garment reflects the materials, animals, and traditions of the group. Even without decoration, there is identity in how hides are cut and assembled. An unexpected moment of play breaks out as children roll briefly in the snow, bundled so securely that laughter replaces danger. Their garments puff around them, absorbing contact with the frozen ground. Play here is not separate from survival. It is practice in moving through the environment. You realize that these small figures wrapped in fur represent the continuation of every skill you've witnessed. Without them learning to manage hides, tools, and cold, the knowledge would vanish within a generation. The camp quiets as evening approaches. Children are wrapped again, this time more heavily prepared for sleep in temperatures that will fall sharply after sunset. Layers are adjusted with remarkable care, ensuring that warmth lasts through the long night. In this world, clothing is an inheritance, passed from hunter to child, from season to season, from one Ice Age winter into the next. And as you watch the youngest members drift towards sleep beneath layers of carefully prepared fur, you see not only protection against the cold, but the preservation of human life itself. As night deepens, the boundary between what you wear and where you live becomes less clear. The same hides that protect your body during the day now help shape the space where the group rests. Clothing and shelter are not separate technologies here. They are parts of one continuous system. You help arrange several large skins along a low frame made from branches and bones. These coverings block the wind that sweeps across the plain, creating a small protected hollow. Inside, the air feels noticeably calmer. Not warm exactly, but stable. The difference is enough. Archaeological sites from the Upper Paleolithic period show evidence of such structures. At locations like Mezhyrish in present-day Ukraine, remains of dwellings built with mammoth bones and covered with hides have been uncovered. These shelters suggest that Ice Age communities used animal skins not only as clothing but as architectural material. You settle onto a layered bedding made from furs, their thickness insulating you from the frozen ground. Without this barrier, heat would drain rapidly from your body through direct contact with the earth. Ground insulation is just as important as protection from the air. Someone adjusts a hide panel at the entrance, angling it to reduce drafts. The movement is small but precise. Living in this environment requires constant awareness of airflow. A poorly placed covering could undo hours of effort spent preserving warmth. You notice that garments worn during the day often double as blankets at night. Rather than owning separate items, people rely on versatility. A cloak becomes bedding, a wrap becomes a wall covering. Every piece must perform multiple roles. This flexibility may explain why relatively few permanent structures appear in some archaeological records. Researchers have suggested that portable materials like hides allowed groups to create temporary but effective shelters wherever they travelled. Others argue that more substantial dwellings existed but left fewer traces because organic materials decomposed over time. The debate continues as new sites are studied. Inside the shelter, the smell of smoked leather mingles with the faint scent of embers from a small internal fire. The space feels enclosed but breathable. Hides allow some air exchange while still reducing heat loss, an accidental but valuable feature. A curious observation arises when you notice how people arrange their sleeping positions. Bodies are placed close, often sharing overlapping furs. Shared warmth reduces the amount of insulation each individual needs. Cooperation extends even into rest. This collective approach reflects a broader survival strategy. Resources are pooled because isolation would be dangerous. A single person alone could not easily maintain enough hides to stay protected. You pull a covering around your shoulders and feel its familiar weight settle. It is the same garment you walked in earlier, now transformed into bedding. The material carries the memory of movement, smoke, and effort. Anthropologists sometimes describe this adaptability as material efficiency, where objects are designed to shift function depending on circumstance. Ice Age hides embody this idea perfectly. They are clothing, shelter tools, and insulation all at once. Outside, the wind continues its steady sweep across the open land. Inside, the layered skins soften its sound, turning harsh gusts into distant murmurs. The shelter does not eliminate the environment. It moderates it, creating a fragile pocket of comfort. A brief conversation passes quietly among members of the group, discussing tomorrow's plans and checking that coverings are secure. Even rest requires preparation for what comes next. You lie back, looking at the curved shapes of hides forming the ceiling. Firelight flickers across their surfaces, revealing seams and textures that tell the story of many hunts and many hands. Historians still examine how sophisticated these combined clothing shelter systems were. Some evidence points to surprisingly complex arrangements, while other findings suggest simpler constructions adapted as needed. Without surviving fabrics, interpretation must rely on indirect clues. Yet here in this reconstructed moment, the logic feels clear. When survival depends on insulation, every available material must serve as both garment and dwelling. You close your eyes, surrounded by layers that began as protection against the cold outdoors and now form the walls that guard your sleep. In the Ice Age, home is not a place you build once and leave behind. It is something you carry, unfold, and wrap around yourself wherever the journey leads. As you grow accustomed to this way of living, you begin to notice that not all garments are purely practical. Some carry subtle differences in texture, arrangement, or added detail. At first, these variations seem accidental, but over time a pattern emerges. Even in a world focused on survival, people find ways to express identity through what they wear. One morning, you see someone carefully attaching small decorative elements along the edge of a hide. Tiny pierced shells, bits of bone, and carved fragments are stitched into place with remarkable patience. They do not improve warmth. They do not strengthen the seam, yet they are added anyway. Archaeological discoveries strongly support this blending of function and expression. At sites like Sungir in Russia, dating to around 30,000 years ago, thousands of ivory beads were found arranged in patterns that once adorned clothing. These beads were sewn onto garments, suggesting Ice Age people invested extraordinary effort into decoration even in harsh climates. You run your hand over one such piece. The beads are smooth, cool to the touch, each one shaped individually. Creating them must have required hours of carving and drilling using stone tools. Why spend so much time on something not strictly necessary? That question still fascinates researchers. Some believe decoration signaled group identity or social roles, helping individuals recognize allies across wide landscapes. Others think ornamentation played a part in ritual or storytelling, embedding meaning into everyday objects. The precise motivations remain open to interpretation. You notice that decorated garments are not worn constantly. They appear during gatherings, shared meals, or moments of rest, rather than during strenuous travel. Practicality still dominates when conditions demand it. This balance between beauty and function feels deeply human. Even here, surrounded by cold and uncertainty, there is room for creativity. A slightly surprising detail is how decoration may also have helped maintain garments. Beaded seams reinforce edges, distributing stress and preventing tearing. Something beautiful can also be useful, even if that was not the original intent. You sit with others working on a new piece, listening to the soft tapping of tools, shaping small ornaments. The activity feels calmer than scraping or stitching, almost reflective. It is a chance to slow down to focus on something beyond immediate survival. Anthropologists have long debated whether symbolic expression like this marked a major shift in human cognition during the Upper Paleolithic. Some argue it reflects the emergence of complex culture and shared meaning. Others caution that earlier humans may have expressed themselves in ways that simply did not preserve well in the archaeological record. The discussion continues, shaped by each new discovery. You notice how garments differ slightly from person to person. One has a distinctive fringe, another uses contrasting fur textures. These variations act almost like signatures recognizable without words. Even color plays a role. Though most hides remain in natural tones, some are treated with ochre or other pigments. The muted reds and browns blend with the landscape while still creating visual distinction. A child watches closely, learning not just how to stay warm, but how to participate in these expressions. Clothing teaches belonging as much as protection. The camp feels different during these quieter moments. Laughter comes more easily. Stories are shared. Hands remain busy, but the urgency softens. You realize that warmth is not only physical. These small acts of decoration create emotional comfort as well, reinforcing connection in an environment that might otherwise feel relentlessly harsh. Historians sometimes refer to this combination of survival and symbolism as cultural layering, where practical objects accumulate meaning over time. A garment begins as protection but becomes memory, identity, even art. As evening light fades across the tundra, you wrap yourself again in fur that carries both warmth and the marks of human creativity. In the Ice Age, clothing is never just about enduring the cold. It's also about remembering who you are while doing so. As seasons pass, you begin to notice that some furs are valued more highly than others. Not every animal provides the same warmth, durability, or ease of use. These differences quietly shape relationships between groups because certain materials are worth seeking even when they are not locally available. You watch as visitors arrive from another band, their approach cautious but familiar. Exchanges like this are not daily events, yet they are not rare either. They bring items wrapped carefully in hides of their own, and soon small bundles are opened for inspection. Among them are pelts, unlike the ones you usually see. Thicker, darker, perhaps taken from animals that roam farther north or at higher elevations. The texture alone tells you they offer exceptional insulation. Archaeological evidence suggests that long-distance exchange networks existed even during the Ice Age. Materials such as obsidian shells and carved ornaments have been found hundreds of kilometers from their original sources. It is reasonable to believe that valuable furs moved along similar pathways, though organic materials rarely survive long enough to confirm this directly. You sit nearby as the adults examine each item with quiet seriousness. Hands test the density of fur. Edges are checked for proper preparation. This is not casual bartering. The stakes are high because better clothing can mean safer winters. A practical understanding has emerged. Some hides excel in extreme cold but are heavy. Others are lighter and suited for travel. Having access to a variety allows groups to adapt more flexibly to changing condition. There is also an interesting social dimension to these exchanges. Relationships must be maintained for trade to continue. Hospitality, shared meals, and mutual trust become part of the process. Warmth, in a sense, becomes something negotiated between communities. Historians still debate how structured these interactions were. Some suggest early exchange systems were informal, based on kinship or seasonal meetings. Others argue that predictable trade routes may have formed, connecting distant populations through repeated contact. Without written records, interpretation relies heavily on scattered archaeological clues. You notice how knowledge travels along with materials. Visitors demonstrate slightly different stitching styles and cutting methods. Techniques are observed discussed through gesture and sometimes adopted. Innovation spreads, quietly carried in conversation and imitation rather than formal instruction. A slightly curious detail appears when someone admires not just the warmth of a pelt, but its appearance. Certain patterns or colours may have been prized simply because they were rare. Even here, practicality and preference intertwine. Bundles are eventually redistributed. No one leaves empty-handed. The exchange strengthens resilience on both sides. You reflect on how this movement of materials expands possibilities. A group limited to local animals might struggle during unusual weather. Access to diverse furs acts like an early form of resource insurance. Researchers studying prehistoric mobility often highlight how interconnected human populations may have been, even across large distances. Clothing materials likely played a role in maintaining those connections, though direct evidence remains elusive. As evening settles, the visitors prepare to depart wrapped again in their own carefully made garments. Their silhouettes fade gradually into the open landscape, carrying with them both goods and shared understanding. You return to camp with a newly acquired hide running your hands across its unfamiliar texture. It represents more than insulation. It represents contact cooperation and the widening network of human adaptation. In this frozen age, survival is not achieved alone. It's strengthened through exchange, where warmth itself becomes something passed from hand to hand across the vast Ice Age world. As you grow more accustomed to travelling and trading for better hides, you begin to appreciate something that might seem obvious at first glance. Fire, for all its importance, cannot replace what you wear. The relationship between flame and fur is not competitive. It is complementary, and understanding that different shapes daily decisions. You sit beside a carefully tended fire as evening cold settles in. The warmth feels yours immediate on your face, almost luxurious after a long day of movement. Yet when you shift slightly, the heat vanishes from your side. Fire warms unevenly, it demands fuel. It anchors you to one place. Fur, by contrast, moves with you. Archaeological studies show that Ice Age hearths were often small and strategically placed rather than enormous bonfires. Fuel such as wood or bone could be scarce in tundra environments, so fires were used efficiently, mainly for cooking light and hide preparation, rather than as the sole source of warmth. You hold your hands out briefly, then wrap them back inside your layers. The garment retains heat long after you step away from the flames. Without it, the cold would return instantly. This realization likely shaped human settlement patterns. Instead of building life entirely around fixed fires, groups could remain mobile, carrying insulation with them. Clothing allowed warmth to exist independently of any one location. Some researchers argue that this portability helped Homo sapiens outcompete other hominin species in colder regions. Neanderthals, for example, certainly used hides, but debates continue over whether their clothing was as tailored or versatile. The discussion remains unresolved, with new findings constantly revising assumptions. You watch as someone carefully uses the fire not to heat themselves, but to warm a tool before working a stiff patch of leather. Fire becomes an assistant rather than a solution. There is also a subtle danger in relying too heavily on flames. Sparks can damage hides. Excessive heat can dry them out, making them brittle. Maintaining the right distance requires experience. A slightly amusing moment happens when a gust of wind sends smoke swirling unexpectedly, causing everyone to shift positions in a quiet, practiced dance to avoid irritation. Even fire demands negotiation with the environment. You begin to see that warmth in the Ice Age is layered not only in clothing but in strategy. Fire provides bursts of heat and enables processing. Fur provides constant insulation. Shelter blocks wind. Movement generates body heat. Each element supports the others. Historians sometimes describe this as a thermal system rather than a single invention. No one discovery solved the problem of cold. Survival came from combining many small solutions into a cohesive whole. You adjust your garment while stepping away from the fire to gather something nearby. The cold greets you immediately, but it cannot penetrate far. Your clothing holds the line. This independence changes how you think about distance. You can walk beyond the circle of light without fear. Tasks can be done without constant return to the flames. Anthropologists continue to explore how this balance influenced social organization. Did portable warmth allow smaller groups to spread out more widely, or did shared fires remain central gathering points despite improved clothing? Evidence suggests both patterns existed depending on region and climate. As night deepens, the fire burns lower, deliberately kept small to conserve fuel. No one seems worried. Their confidence rests not in the embers but in the layers they wear. You settle down, wrapped securely, noticing how the heat your body produces stays with you, circulating quietly within the fur. The fire crackles nearby, helpful but no longer essential for every moment of comfort. In this frozen world, humanity did not conquer the cold with flames alone. It learned to carry warmth on its own shoulders. One afternoon, as the sky shifts from pale grey to a faint blue, the group encounters a different kind of challenge. Snow begins to fall. At first it is light, almost delicate, but soon it thickens into steady flakes that cling to everything they touch. Cold alone is dangerous. Cold combined with moisture is far worse. You notice how quickly everyone responds. Outer layers are adjusted, tightened, and shaken free of accumulating snow. The goal is not simply to stay warm, but to stay dry. Wet fur loses much of its insulating ability because water fills the tiny air spaces that normally trap heat. Modern cold weather science confirms this principle. Moisture conducts heat away from the body far faster than dry air, accelerating heat loss. Ice Age people may not have used thermodynamic language, but their practices show they understood the effect intimately. You brush snow from your shoulders, copying the movements of others. It is done constantly, almost automatically. Small habits prevent larger problems later. The outer leather surface of your garment begins to show its value now. It resists saturation, allowing snow to sit briefly before being removed. Some hides are treated with oils or fats that improve this resistance, creating an early form of water repellency. There is also an interesting detail in how garments are constructed. Seams are often positioned to shed water away from the body rather than channel it inward. Such design choices suggest careful observation of how materials behave in harsh weather. Scholars still debate how intentionally these features were engineered. Were they conscious innovations, or did they merge gradually through trial and error? The distinction is difficult to determine, yet the effectiveness is undeniable. As snowfall continues, the group slows its pace. Movement generates warmth, but rushing risks sweating, which would create moisture from within. Managing exertion becomes part of temperature control. You feel yourself learning this delicate balance. Walk steadily, do not overheat, adjust layers before discomfort grows. A slightly surprising practice appears when someone removes a garment briefly to air it out despite the cold. Ventilation helps release trapped moisture before it freezes. The action seems counterintuitive, yet it prevents greater heat loss later. This constant awareness of water extends to camp life as well. Wet hides are never left unattended. They are dried, smoked, or worked immediately. Allowing them to freeze while damp would damage their structure. Archaeological interpretations of ancient camps often reveal hearth placements and working areas arranged to facilitate drying and maintenance. These layouts suggest that moisture management was an essential part of daily routines, not an occasional concern. You arrive at a temporary stopping place where hides are shaken vigorously before being brought inside the shelter area. Snow scatters like powdered glass in the air. The smell of damp leather briefly intensifies, then fades as materials begin to dry near controlled fires. Every action is measured. Too much heat could cause shrinkage. Too little leaves dangerous moisture behind. Anthropologists studying traditional Arctic cultures have noted similar practices persisting into recent centuries, reinforcing the idea that such knowledge has deep historical roots. The continuity hints at solutions discovered long ago and refined across generations. As evening falls, your garments feel dry again, their insulating loft restored. The earlier snowfall now lies frozen across the landscape, reflecting faint light under a dim sky. You realise that the true enemy here is not simply low temperature. It is the combination of cold wind and water working together. And through careful preparation, attentive maintenance, and the quiet intelligence embedded in every stitched hide, you remain protected against them all. As weeks pass and conditions subtly shift, you begin to notice that not all cold is the same. The Ice Age is not one endless winter. There are milder stretches, sudden freezes, windy periods, and calmer days when the sun lingers just a little longer on the horizon. With each variation, clothing changes too. The group does not rely on a single set of garments year-round. Instead, different hides are chosen depending on season and activity. You watch as heavier winter pieces are gradually supplemented by lighter ones when temperatures ease, allowing greater mobility without overheating. This adaptability mirrors the animals themselves. Many species grow thicker coats in colder months and shed them when conditions improve. Humans cannot regrow fur naturally, so they recreate the effect by switching materials. Archaeological interpretations suggest that Ice Age communities likely maintained a range of prepared hides for different conditions. Evidence from wear patterns on tools indicates repeated hide working across seasons, supporting the idea of an ongoing wardrobe rather than a single outfit used indefinitely. You try wearing a lighter garment during a day of active travel. The difference is noticeable. You move more easily and your body heat does not build to the uncomfortable levels. Later, when temperatures drop again, heavier layers return. There is also specialization based on animal type. Reindeer skins are prized for deep winter because of their insulating hair. Deer or antelope hides may be used during transitional seasons when breathability matters more than maximum warmth. A slightly unexpected detail appears in how older garments are repurposed. Worn pieces are cut down into mittens, linings, or children's clothing. Nothing is discarded until it can no longer serve any purpose. Material scarcity encourages remarkable efficiency. Some researchers propose that this seasonal flexibility required careful planning, with groups preparing hides months in advance of when they would be needed. Others suggest decisions were more immediate, shaped by opportunistic hunting and short-term needs. The degree of long-term planning remains an open question. You observe how storage becomes important. Spare hides are kept dry and protected, often rolled tightly, and placed where air can circulate. Improper storage could invite mold during warmer intervals, which would weaken the fibers. Even the way garments are repaired reflects seasonal thinking. A heavy winter coat might receive extra reinforcement before the coldest period begins, ensuring it will endure months of constant use. The rhythm of maintenance follows the rhythm of the environment. You sit with others, trimming a hide to prepare it for lighter wear, listening to the steady snip of stone blades. There is no rush. These adjustments are part of anticipating what lies ahead rather than reacting too late. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups in cold climates have documented similar seasonal clothing systems, suggesting that such practices may extend far back into prehistory. Though direct Ice Age fabrics rarely survive, the logic of adaptation is strongly supported. A child tries on a resized garment, turning it experimentally as if testing its comfort. Clothing must not only protect, but allow life to continue, whether walking, working, or playing. The sky shifts again as evening approaches, carrying a different quality of cold than the one you felt weeks ago. You respond instinctively, now adding a thicker layer without needing instruction. What once felt unfamiliar has become routine. In this ever-changing Ice Age world, survival depends not on a single invention, but on the ability to adjust continuously. And your clothing, shaped from the hides of animals that mastered these rhythms long before humans arrived, becomes part of that same cycle of change. Even with all this growing knowledge, life in the Ice Age is never completely predictable. Sudden storms arrive, temperatures plunge without warning. A technique that worked yesterday may need adjusting today. Innovation here is not a dramatic breakthrough, but a steady accumulation of small improvements. One afternoon, a sharp wind begins to sweep across the open plain, far colder than expected for the season. The group responds immediately. Extra layers are added, seams checked, and loose edges tied down to prevent flapping that could let heat escape. You notice someone modifying a garment on the spot, adding an additional strip of fur along an exposed edge. The change is quick but thoughtful, reinforcing an area that often faces the wind. Adaptation happens in real time. Archaeological research suggests that Paleolithic technologies evolved gradually through repeated refinement rather than sudden invention. Tools and techniques show small adjustments across generations, indicating constant experimentation shaped by environmental pressure. You begin to see clothing as part of that same experimental tradition. Every tear repaired teaches something about stress points. Every successful winter confirms which materials perform best. There is also room for creative problem solving. When one type of hide becomes scarce, alternatives are tried. Different stitching patterns appear. Some prove stronger, others are abandoned quietly. A curious example of improvisation comes when you see someone using braided plant fibers alongside sinew to secure a section temporarily. While sinew remains preferred, this combination offers flexibility when supplies are limited. Historians still debate how deliberately Ice Age people approached innovation. Were they consciously inventing new solutions or simply reacting to immediate needs? The distinction may not matter much. Either way, change accumulated through practice. You feel this process yourself while adjusting your own clothing. What once required guidance now comes naturally. You tighten, loosen, or shift layers almost without thinking. The environment acts as a constant instructor. Mistakes are corrected quickly because consequences are immediate. Success is remembered because it keeps you comfortable and safe. Anthropologists often describe such knowledge systems as experiential learning, where understanding grows directly from doing rather than formal teaching. Ice Age communities likely relied heavily on this method, passing insights through demonstration and repetition. A brief pause in the wind allows everyone to assess the effectiveness of their adjustments. The added fur strip works. Heat remains contained. A small improvement becomes part of future practice. You realise that many of the features you now rely on probably began as similar improvisations. Someone noticed a problem, tried a solution, and shared the result. Over years and generations, those solutions formed traditions. Even failures contributed. A poorly treated hide that cracked in the cold would not be prepared the same way again. Experience filtered what lasted. As evening approaches, the storm subsides, leaving behind a sharper awareness of how fragile comfort can be. You sit wrapped in garments shaped not by a single moment of invention, but by countless acts of observation and adjustment. In this world, innovation is quiet. It happens in stitches, repairs, and careful choices that slowly transform necessity into knowledge. And every improvement, no matter how small, strengthens your ability to endure what the Ice Age sends next. Over time, you begin to notice that no single person is responsible for making all this clothing. Every garment represents many hands. One hunter provides the animal. Another prepares the hide. Someone else softens it, stitches it, repairs it, and teaches others how to do the same. Warmth here is a collective achievement. You sit among a group working together on several hides at once. The tasks are divided naturally rather than formally. An experienced elder scrapes with practiced efficiency. A younger adult stretches material across a frame. Another twists sinew into thread. The process resembles a quiet assembly line, though no one would call it that. Archaeological interpretations of Paleolithic living sites often reveal clusters of specialized tools in shared spaces, suggesting communal production rather than isolated work. This arrangement likely increased efficiency and ensured knowledge remained distributed among the group. You realize that cooperation is itself a survival technology. If one person falls ill or is injured, others already know how to continue the work. Skills overlap. Redundancy protects the community just as layered clothing protects the body. There is also a rhythm to these shared efforts. People rotate tasks, preventing exhaustion and allowing everyone to remain familiar with multiple steps. This flexibility may have been essential in small populations where losing a single skill could have serious consequences. A slightly unexpected observation is how conversation flows constantly during this labour. Stories are told, plans are made, advice is given without ceremony. Work becomes a setting for communication as much as production. Some anthropologists believe that collaborative activities like hide working help strengthen social cohesion and may even have supported the development of complex language. Others caution that language likely evolved earlier and simply found new contexts here. The relationship between cooperation and communication remains an active topic of research. You notice how tools are shared without hesitation. A scraper passed from one person to another carries years of wear shaped by many hands. Ownership feels less individual and more collective. Repairs happen in the same spirit. When someone's garment tears, others assist immediately. The problem is treated as communal because a weakened member places everyone at risk during travel or hunting. This mindset changes how you think about clothing itself. It is not a personal possession alone. It is part of the group's shared resilience. Researchers studying small-scale societies often describe this as mutual dependence, where survival relies on networks of cooperation rather than individual self-sufficiency. Ice Age communities almost certainly operated within similar frameworks. You help hold a hide steady while another person stitches, realizing your role is just as necessary in this moment as theirs. Single step stands alone, Ans. As daylight fades finished, pieces are distributed not ceremonially, but practically going to whoever needs the most. Warmth is allocated according to necessity rather than status. A brief laugh erupts when someone tries on a newly finished garment that fits slightly awkwardly, prompting quick adjustments. Even these imperfections become shared experiences, strengthening bonds. You sit back and watch the group continue its work, aware that every stitch carries the weight of collaboration. These garments are not just crafted objects, they are the outcome of trust teaching and shared responsibility. In this frozen landscape, community is as essential as fur, and together, through countless small contributions, you create the warmth that allows everyone to endure. As you spend more time among the group, you notice that the relationship with animals extends beyond practicality. The hides you wear are not treated casually. There is an undercurrent of respect in how they are handled, stored, and even spoken about through gestures and shared stories. After a successful hunt, there is often a quiet pause before work begins. No formal ceremony that you can clearly identify, but a moment of acknowledgement. The animal is not just material, it is a source of continued life for the community. Anthropologists studying later hunter-gatherer societies in cold regions have documented traditions in which animals were thanked or symbolically honoured because their bodies provided food, clothing and tools. While direct evidence from the Ice Age is difficult to recover, some researchers believe similar attitudes may have existed far earlier. You watch as an elder carefully folds a finished garment, smoothing the fur with deliberate attention. The action feels almost ceremonial, though it is also practical. Respect and usefulness blend together. There is also storytelling. Around evening, fires people mimic animal movements or describe hunts with gestures that emphasize not just skill, but understanding of the creature's behavior. These stories pass along ecological knowledge as much as they entertain. Historians continue to debate how spiritual or symbolic these practices might have been during the Paleolithic. Some interpret cave art and carved figurines as evidence of belief systems tied closely to animals. Others argue that assigning modern ideas of spirituality to ancient people risks misunderstanding their intentions. The discussion remains open, shaped by fragmentary clues. You begin to sense that wearing fur is not merely about warmth. It is also about connection to the landscape and the beings that inhabit it. A slightly curious detail appears when certain hides are reserved for specific uses rather than treated interchangeably. Perhaps one is favoured for sleeping coverings, another for travel. These preferences may reflect observed qualities, or they may carry meanings you cannot fully see. The garments themselves sometimes display marks or arrangements that recall the animal's original form, preserving a visual memory even after transformation. Function does not entirely erase origin. Researchers studying symbolic behaviour often note that early humans may have blurred distinctions between practical and cultural objects. Clothing could serve both roles simultaneously, offering protection while reinforcing shared identity. You sit with others repairing a well-worn coat, noticing how carefully each stitch is placed. This is not disposable work. The material is valued, maintained, extended as long as possible. Children listen closely to the stories told during these repairs, absorbing lessons about animals, seasons, and responsibility. Knowledge is passed through narrative as much as demonstration. Outside, the wind moves across the tundra, carrying faint sounds of distant herds. Life continues in cycles, each dependent on the other. You wrap your garment more tightly, aware that it represents not just adaptation but relationship. Survival here depends on understanding, using and respecting the environment rather than attempting to dominate it. In the Ice Age, clothing is more than insulation. It is a reminder that human life is woven directly into the lives of the animals that made such endurance possible. Gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, the climate begins to shift. Not dramatically, not in ways that would be obvious to someone staying only a few days, but enough that over years the group must adjust its habits again. The Ice Age is not a single frozen moment. It pulses with fluctuations, colder decades followed by slightly milder ones. You notice changes in migration patterns. Herds arrive earlier or linger longer. Snow cover varies, winds feel different. These environmental signals require constant reassessment of clothing strategies. Archaeological and geological records confirm that the late Pleistocene climate was highly variable, marked by cycles known as stadials and interstadials. These swings could alter ecosystems within a human lifetime, forcing communities to adapt repeatedly. You watch as older, extremely heavy garments are used less often during certain periods, replaced by more versatile layers. Preparation does not stop, but emphasis shifts toward flexibility rather than maximum insulation. This adaptability becomes a defining strength. Instead of relying on one perfect solution, people maintain a range of options ready to meet whatever conditions arise. A practical adjustment appears when some hides are cut to allow greater ventilation during active travel. Openings can be closed again when temperatures fall. These small design changes reflect accumulated experience with changing weather. Scholars still argue about how rapidly humans responded to these climatic swings. Some evidence suggests remarkable resilience and quick adaptation, while other findings imply that certain groups struggled or relocated when conditions shifted too quickly. The balance between innovation and migration remains debated. You help reorganize stored materials, selecting which garments remain in frequent use and which are reserved for harsher times. Planning becomes essential because seasons are no longer entirely predictable. There is also an interesting side effect. As environments diversify, so do available animals. Different species bring new types of hides with distinct qualities, encouraging experimentation with unfamiliar materials. You feel this sense of exploration while handling a lighter skin that would have been less useful during colder years, but now offers excellent comfort during moderate conditions. Anthropologists sometimes describe this phase as adaptive plasticity, the ability of human cultures to modify behavior and technology in response to environmental variability. Ice Age clothing systems appear to exemplify this flexibility. Children growing up during these shifts learn slightly different routines than earlier generations. Knowledge evolves shaped by what works in the present rather than preserved unchanged. Even storytelling reflects this awareness. Elders recall winters harsher than the ones you now experience, reminding listeners that conditions can return at any time. A slightly unexpected practice emerges when some older garments are deliberately maintained even if rarely used. They act as preparation for extreme weather that might reappear. Nothing is discarded simply because it is temporarily unnecessary. You realize that survival here is not about mastering a single environment, but preparing for many versions of it. As the landscape subtly transforms around you, clothing continues to evolve alongside it, adjusting to each new balance of cold wind and resource availability. In this ever-changing Ice Age, adaptability is the warmest protection of all. Many thousands of years later, long after these camps have vanished and the hides themselves have returned to the earth, faint traces of this world remain buried beneath soil and stone. Imagine now that you are both participant and future observer, standing in a landscape where only fragments survive to tell the story. Organic materials like fur and leather rarely endure the passage of time, especially outside frozen environments. Yet archaeologists have uncovered indirect clues that reveal how important these garments once were. Tools used specifically for scraping hides appear in large numbers at Ice Age sites, their edges worn smooth by repeated contact with skin. You pick up one such scraper in your mind, noticing the polish that forms only through long use. It is a silent testimony to countless hours spent transforming raw material into protection. At some locations, impressions left in ancient sediments suggest the presence of stitched materials even when the hides themselves are gone. Tiny puncture marks align in patterns that resemble seams. These faint signatures are like echoes of vanished clothing. Frozen discoveries offer even clearer glimpses. In rare cases where permafrost preserved organic remains, fragments of skin and fur have survived, confirming that people relied heavily on animal materials for insulation. These findings are precious because they provide direct physical evidence of what is otherwise mostly inferred. A famous example comes from the discovery of Ötzi the Iceman, though he lived much later than the Ice Age. His clothing, made from multiple animal hides stitched together, demonstrates techniques that may have deep prehistoric roots. While separated by thousands of years, the continuity and method is striking. Researchers continue to analyse microscopic residues on ancient tools, identifying traces of collagen and fat that confirm their use in hideworking. These scientific techniques allow modern investigators to reconstruct activities that left no visible garments behind. You imagine archaeologists carefully brushing away layers of soil, uncovering these subtle hints. They must piece together entire lifeways from tools, patterns, and environmental data. There is still disagreement about how complex Ice Age clothing truly was. Some scholars envision sophisticated, multi-layered outfits comparable to those of recent Arctic cultures. Others argue that reconstructions risk becoming too elaborate without enough direct evidence. The debate is ongoing, fueled by both imagination and caution. A slightly unexpected clue sometimes appears in the form of decorative objects such as beads found arranged in positions that suggest they were once sewn onto garments. These items outlast the hides themselves, preserving patterns long after the fabric has vanished. You realise that archaeology often works like detective work, assembling stories from absence as much as presence. The missing hides speak through the tools that shaped them and the environments that demanded them. Anthropologists combine these findings with studies of traditional cold weather cultures to build careful comparisons. While not identical, such parallels help illuminate how ancient people may have solved similar problems. Standing in this imagined excavation, you feel the distance between past and present narrow. Though the materials are gone, their influence remains embedded in human expansion, settlement patterns, and survival strategies. What once wrapped bodies against the Ice Age cold now exists only as marks on stone, scattered beads, and worn tools. Yet through these quiet remnants, the story of prehistoric warmth continues to be rediscovered piece by piece. Even with all the discoveries carefully assembled by archaeologists and researchers, there is still much about Ice Age clothing that remains uncertain. You might imagine that by now every detail would be known, yet the story is full of gaps, shaped by materials that rarely survive and behaviours that left only subtle traces. Scholars continue to examine how tailored these garments truly were. Some reconstructions suggest fitted parkas, leggings, and boots remarkably similar to those used by recent Arctic communities. Others urge caution, pointing out that without preserved examples, it is difficult to determine how standardised such designs might have been. You picture researchers studying stone tools under microscopes, searching for microscopic wear patterns that hint at stitching or cutting techniques. Each mark becomes a clue, but rarely a complete answer. There is also ongoing discussion about when clothing first appeared. Genetic studies of human lice provide one unusual line of evidence. Body lice, which depend on clothing to survive, seem to have diverged from head lice tens of thousands of years ago. This suggests that humans were regularly wearing garments by that time. It is an unexpected source of information, but one that has sparked lively debate. Not everyone agrees on how to interpret that data. Some scientists question whether lice evolution can pinpoint clothing use so precisely. The conversation illustrates how many disciplines must work together to approach these ancient questions. You imagine teams comparing archaeological findings with climate models, trying to understand exactly how cold different regions were and what kind of insulation would have been required. Small changes in temperature estimates can alter assumptions about what people needed to wear. Another mystery involves how knowledge spread. Did innovations in hide preparation emerge independently in multiple regions, or were they shared through migrating groups? Evidence exists for both possibilities, leaving the question unresolved. A slightly curious problem researchers face is that successful clothing leaves fewer traces than unsuccessful attempts. A well-made garment is worn repeatedly until it disintegrates, leaving almost nothing behind. Failures, on the other hand, may never enter the archaeological record at all. You reflect on how much of human ingenuity disappears simply because it worked too well to leave evidence. Anthropologists often rely on experimental archaeology to fill these gaps. Volunteers recreate Ice Age methods using stone tools and animal hides, testing how long preparation takes or how garments perform in cold conditions. These experiments provide valuable insight, though they cannot perfectly replicate ancient experience. Some historians caution against assuming that all Ice Age groups lived the same way. Environments varied widely and clothing strategies likely differed as well. Diversity rather than uniformity may have defined prehistoric adaptation. You sit with this uncertainty, recognizing that the story of fur clothing is both well supported and incomplete. Facts emerge alongside unanswered questions, each discovery inviting further exploration. In a way, this uncertainty mirrors the lives of the people themselves. They did not possess final answers either. They experimented, adapted, and adjusted to conditions that changed without warning. And now, thousands of years later, researchers follow a similar path, piecing together fragments to understand how humanity first learned to stay warm on purpose. You return in your mind to the wide, frozen plains where this journey began. The wind still moves across the tundra. Herds still migrate. Fires still glow faintly against the long twilight. Yet now you see the scene differently. What once looked like a hostile emptiness has become a landscape shaped by the ingenuity, cooperation, and quiet persistence. The hides wrapped around each person are no longer just protection. They represent thousands of learned actions, hunting with care, preparing materials patiently, sharing skills across generations, adjusting to weather, season, and terrain. Every stitch is a memory of adaptation. Modern historians often describe this development as one of the key enablers of human expansion into colder regions. Without reliable clothing, large parts of the planet would have remained inaccessible. Fur garments helped transform humans from inhabitants of milder climates into explorers of nearly every environment on Earth. You think about how familiar this achievement feels even now. The coat hanging by your door, the blanket folded at the end of your bed, the insulated walls around you. All of these comforts trace their logic back to those early experiments with animal skins and trapped air. A small unexpected connection appears when you realize that the principles remain unchanged. Materials may be lighter, cleaner, and manufactured, yet they still rely on layering, insulation, and protection from moisture just as Ice Age clothing did. Researchers continue to study ancient techniques not only for historical curiosity, but also for inspiration. Some modern outdoor gear designers examine traditional hide clothing to understand how natural materials managed heat so efficiently. You imagine the people you have walked beside, unaware that their daily routines would influence technology tens of thousands of years later. They were not inventing fashion or industry, they were simply trying to stay alive through another winter. Scholars still explore how much these innovations shaped later cultural developments, from migration routes to social cooperation. The full impact may never be measured, but its presence is undeniable. You stand once more in that imagined camp, feeling the reassuring weight of fur around your shoulders. The cold has not disappeared. It never did. What changed was the human ability to meet it with preparation rather than fear. And now, as the scene slowly softens, the pace of the story begins to ease. The wind grows quieter, movements slow, fires burn lower, not from neglect but from intention. People settle into their coverings, drawing warmth close, letting the long night arrive without resistance. You follow their example. You wrap yourself in layers that hold heat gently the way those ancient garments once did. The sounds of scraping tools, murmured conversation, and shifting hides fade into stillness. Above, the Ice Age sky stretches wide and calm, filled with the distant stars that seem to glow a little softer now. There is nothing left to prepare, nothing left to chase. Only rest protected by knowledge carried across generations. Breathing slows, muscles loosen, the cold remains outside where it belongs. And in this quiet moment you share something deeply familiar with those early humans. The simple comfort of being warm enough to sleep. Now let the images fade even further. Imagine the fire reduced to a gentle glow, its light barely touching the edges of the shelter. The heavy furs around you feel softer, with each breath settling into place like a calm, steady weight. Outside, the vast frozen landscape stretches in silence, no longer threatening, simply existing as it always has. Your attention drifts no longer focused on tools or weather or movement. The careful work of survival is done for now. There is nothing to fix, nothing to carry, nothing to plan until morning. Just warmth held close and the slow rhythm of rest. The sounds that once filled the camp have quieted completely. Only the faint whisper of wind remains distant and steady, like a lullaby moving across the plains. The same wind that once demanded such effort now passes by without consequence, kept at bay by layers shaped long ago. You feel how knowledge can become comfort, how skills practiced over generations can create a sense of safety even in the harshest places. That ancient understanding lingers still carried into every blanket, every coat, every small act of staying warm. Your breathing matches the calm of the night. The world feels unhurried. The cold is far away. The darkness is gentle. And so you rest, wrapped in the oldest technology of all. A simple layer between you and the chill. A quiet reminder that even in the Ice Age, humans found ways to make the night livable. Sweet dreams.